Seoul's midnight rain stitched silver lines across Itaewon as Tolani Okafor ran, breath burning, shoes slapping puddles. Behind her, dead had a face, 3 men with tidy smiles and folding knives. She'd slipped them near a convenience store, ducking between scooters and crates of ramen. She slowed when the alley opened onto a back street where an old office block dozed between 2 glass towers. The building looked retired from ambition, paint flaking, brass directory dulled. Tolani wiped rain from her brow and squared her shoulders. Survival, she had learned, was not bravery, it was math. Tonight the equation had one solution. Kong Jin. The name tasted like a locked door. In Seoul's whispered economy, he was liquidity with a pulse. Legitimate on the record, inevitable off it. She had vowed never to enter his orbit. Yet here she was, pushing through a metal door that exhaled leather, smoke, and conditioned air. Light pooled along the corridor like puddles of honey. A single camera blinked. Footsteps sounded once, hers, before a second rhythm answered from the far end. He was already waiting, a tall constant dressed in charcoal and calm. No entourage, no theatrics. Just eyes that observed like a surgeon's, clinical, precise. "Tolani Okafor," he said, consonants crisp. "You make good time." She hid her trembling fingers in her coat. "I need terms," she said. "Clean terms. No ownership. No multiplying debt." "One hears things," he replied. "Collectors with clumsy hands. A cafe manager who pays late. A woman who works 3 jobs and sleeps inside subway windows." "You've done your homework," she said. "I buy futures," he said. "What are you offering?" "My labor. Logistics. Translation. I know immigrant routes, paperwork traps, streets friendly only to morning shifts. Put me on legitimate work. I'll clear what's owed and keep my name." He considered her in the silence before a storm. "Protection is non-negotiable," he said at last. "If you sign with me, no one touches you. Take a company phone, report only to me, follow security protocols. Duration, until the numbers balance." "Contract," she said, "not custody." His mouth tilted, almost a smile, almost a warning. "Contract," he agreed. He produced a folder. Paper. Ink. Consequences and serif authority. Tolani skimmed. Salary, hazard differentials, exit clauses, confidentiality carved like marble. No romance, no trap she could see, only the danger of proximity. She signed because survival is sometimes paperwork. When she capped the pen, thunder rolled over the city like applause. Jamin slid a slim phone across the table. "Exclusive line," he said. "Use it only for me." "I don't like leashes," she said. "Leashes pull," he answered. "This signals." He pivoted for the door. "Tomorrow at 9. Cheongdam. We're something that says you planned your life this way." Left alone, Tolani pocketed the phone and listened to the rain relearn her name. Outside, sirens stitched the distance and the city kept breathing. She stood straighter, counting steps between survival and whatever waited at 9. Welcome to Munlyt Stories, where Munlyt meets myth. Love timeless tales? Then hit like, subscribe, and join the circle. Every story begins with you. Morning in Seoul didn't erase the night. It only painted over it with neon's softer cousin. Sunlight bouncing off glass towers, buses groaning awake, and vendors steaming mandu on the sidewalks. Tolani Okafor sat at the back of a crowded cafe, coat button high, hands wrapped around a bitter Americano she hadn't wanted but needed to hold. The phone Kong Jin had given her rested on the table like a quiet command. She had stared at it all night in her one-room flat, wondering whether to throw it into the Han River or hide it under her pillow. Instead, she carried it here, as if proximity alone meant she hadn't surrendered. At 9 sharp, it buzzed. A single word lit the screen car. Her chest tightened. She pushed the coffee away, grabbed her bag, and stepped outside. A black sedan idled at the curb, polished enough to mirror the street. The driver didn't look at her, didn't speak, only opened the door. Inside, silence stretched. Seoul's rhythm blurred past the tinted windows. Shopkeepers setting out displays, school children in bright yellow caps, couples clutching hands like they could stop time. Tolani folded her own hands in her lap, reminding herself this was a contract, a transaction, nothing more. The car stopped in front of a building that screamed power without needing to raise its voice. Cheongdam, glass facade, marble lobby, a waterfall wall murmuring wealth. She followed a security escort past turnstiles and mirrored elevators until they stopped before a conference suite trimmed in walnut and steel. Inside, Kong Jin stood by the window, jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled neatly at his forearms. He glanced at her without greeting, then back at the skyline as if measuring it. "You're punctual," he said. "You told me 9, she replied. "Punctuality means you understand the weight of time. Most don't." He gestured toward a folder on the table. Charts, shipping manifests, customs documents, all in Korean and English. "You'll handle vetting," he explained. "Cross-check every name, every date. Spot red flags before they cost me." Tolani skimmed the first page, recognizing patterns. Underpaid couriers, mismatched invoices, addresses that didn't exist. It was a language she spoke fluently, born from her years balancing 3 jobs and translating paperwork for other immigrants. "You're not afraid of details," Jamin observed, watching her eyes move. "Details keep people alive," she answered. He studied her, expression unreadable. "Good. You'll report directly to me. No detours, no whispers to others. And if anyone asks what you do, I say I work logistics." "Exactly." For a moment, silence thickened between them, not uncomfortable but deliberate. He was testing her, she realized, not her skills, but her spine. Finally, he reached for his jacket. "There's a dinner tonight. A private club. If you're under my contract, you need to be seen. We're something that says you belong." Tolani stiffened. "I don't belong in your world." "You do now," he replied, already heading for the door. She exhaled slowly, staring at the skyline beyond the glass. Belonging, she knew, wasn't a gift. It was a negotiation. And tonight, she would have to prove she could bargain with wolves. The invitation was not written, nor spoken. It arrived as a garment bag left outside Tolani's apartment door at dusk. Inside hung a midnight blue silk dress, understated yet commanding, its cut deliberate in ways she didn't dare define. A note was tucked into the pocket. 9 p.m. Car waits downstairs. She dressed slowly, tugging her sleek bun tighter, checking her reflection in the cracked mirror. The dress fit too well, as if someone had studied her measurements without asking. It unsettled her, but the alternative, arriving unprepared, was worse. At 9 sharp, the same black sedan idled below her building. She slipped inside. No questions, no greetings. Seoul outside shimmered like an endless showroom, glass towers glowing with ambition, alleys hiding shadows that didn't vanish with night. The car pulled up before a private club in Cheongdam, its facade glowing gold, guarded by men who wore suits like uniforms. Inside, velvet curtains and crystal chandeliers smothered the air in perfume and wealth. Every corner whispered power, every laugh a calculation. Tolani clutched her small purse as if it could anchor her. She hadn't wanted to come, but Jamin had been clear. "If you're under my contract, you must be seen." She told herself it was only optics. Visibility meant protection. Still, her pulse throbbed against the silk. Across the room, Kong Jin stood among a circle of men in immaculate suits. He didn't raise his voice, yet every word bent the group toward him. He wasn't flashy, not like the heir she sometimes glimpsed in Gangnam cafés. His strength was quieter, coiled, a predator that never needed to roar. Their eyes met briefly across the room. He didn't smile, he rarely did, but there was something in the look, an acknowledgement. She forced herself not to look away first. Tolani drifted toward the bar, sipping a drink she didn't like, her ears catching fragments of conversations in Korean, Chinese, English. Deals traded like currency, secrets worn like silk gloves. She was out of place, and everyone knew it. The mood shifted when a new group entered. Men with scarred faces and eyes that gleamed with threat. Conversation dimmed, replaced by the brittle edge of rivalry. One of them, tall, with a scar splitting his cheek, locked eyes with Jamin. Chair scraped, hands slid inside jackets. Words hissed too fast for Tolani to follow. She froze, drink clutched, until movement erupted. Glass shattered, a table overturned. Men lunged, fists and knives flashing beneath the chandelier. Tolani stumbled back, pressing against the wall, her heart pounding. 2 men crashed into the bar near her, spilling liquor across the counter. And then one of them noticed her. His gaze flicked, calculation, leverage. He lunged. Tolani gasped, instinct pinning her to the wall. But before his hand could touch her, Jamin was there. His grip clamped the man's wrist, twisted hard, his other fist snapping against the man's jaw. The attacker collapsed. "Stay down!" Jamin barked at Tolani, eyes sharp with something she'd never seen before. Not calm, not control. Fear. The chandelier still swung overhead, scattering fractured light across the wreckage. Broken glass glittered on the velvet carpet, and the room smelled of spilled liquor, sweat, and blood. The rival men had retreated, dragged out by their wounded, leaving only silence and the faint echo of chaos. Tolani's knees wobbled as she rose from where she'd crouched behind the bar. Her palms stung, tiny cuts from glass embedding themselves into her skin. She flexed her hands, swallowing the panic that threatened to choke her. Kong Jin crossed the room toward her, his jacket torn at the shoulder, a thin cut tracing his cheek. He looked untouched otherwise, composed, even as the air still vibrated with violence. His eyes, however, betrayed something different, the raw edge of concern. "Did anyone touch you?" His voice was low, clipped. Tolani shook her head quickly. "No, I'm fine." Jamin's gaze lingered on her face, scanning, confirming. His chest rose and fell heavily, as though he hadn't stopped breathing hard since the moment the fight began. Then, in front of the remaining guests, politicians, businessmen, women draped in diamonds, he pulled her into his arms. The embrace was not gentle. It was fierce, tight, protective to the point of suffocation. Tolani stiffened, shocked by the force of it. Her instinct screamed to push him away, but another part of her, the one still trembling from fear, found a strange safety in his hold. The room had stilled, all eyes on them. She realized what this display meant. It was not just comfort, it was declaration. Kong Jin was staking a claim, showing everyone that she was under his protection, untouchable to enemies, valuable to him. When he finally let go, his jaw was set in stone. "We're leaving." He guided her out, past the wreckage, past the hushed stairs. Outside, the black sedan waited. They entered in silence, the city lights streaking across the windows as the driver pulled into the night. Tolani pressed her back against the leather seat, trying to steady her breathing. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, the scarred man's lunge, Jamin's brutal precision, the fear in his eyes. "You shouldn't have brought me there," she whispered finally. "You needed to see it," he said, gaze fixed out the window. "This is the world you stepped into when you signed that contract. Or the world you dragged me into." Her voice was sharp, laced with the anger she hadn't let herself feel until now. His eyes shifted to her, steady, unreadable. "If they see you with me, they know you're under my protection. Tonight, they learn what that means. Or they see me as your weakness," she shot back. Something flickered in his expression. Anger, maybe, but also something heavier, harder to name. "You are not my weakness, Tolani. You are the reason I fight harder." Her breath caught. She hated that his words touched something in her, hated the way her chest tightened. Because in that moment, she saw not just the ruthless strategist, but the lonely man hidden beneath. And it terrified her more than the fight itself. The morning after the brawl, Seoul felt louder, brighter, as though mocking the silence Tolani carried inside. She sat at a corner table of the cafe where she worked part-time, wiping down trays with mechanical motions. Her boss scowled at her slower pace, but she barely noticed. All night she had replayed it. The scarred man lunging, Jamin stepping between them, his fist like thunder, his arms pulling her close in front of everyone. She could still feel the weight of that embrace, heavy with possession disguised as protection. The bell above the cafe door chimed. 2 men in dark suits entered, their presence shifting the air. Customers glanced up, then quickly backed down, sensing authority they couldn't name. They didn't order coffee. Instead, they approached her boss, spoke in hushed Korean, and handed him a card. Moments later, her boss shuffled over, face pale. "Miss Okafor," he said stiffly. "They're asking for you." Her stomach dropped. She set down the rag and walked toward them, forcing calm into her steps. One of the men inclined his head politely. "Ma'am, Kong Sajangnam requests your presence." She clenched her jaw. I'm working. The man's polite smile didn't falter. He insists. The word insists landed like a stone. Tolani exhaled slowly and grabbed her bag. She couldn't refuse, not here, not with all eyes on her. Outside, the black sedan waited. Again. She slid in, the smell of leather and steel surrounding her. Minutes later, she was in Jaemin's office, its wide windows flooding sunlight across polished stone. He sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled, calm as if the previous night's violence had been a rehearsal. "You sent men to drag me out of work," she said. Her tone clipped. "I sent men to escort you," he corrected. "Your schedule belongs to me now. We have more pressing matters." Her hands curled into fists. That was not part of the contract. His gaze lifted from the documents before him, sharp and unyielding. "The contract adapts. Your safety is non-negotiable." "Safety or control?" she challenged. He stood, walking around the desk until he was close enough for her to feel the quiet pressure of his presence. "Both," he admitted. "If I don't control the variables, I can't protect what matters." "What matters?" she asked, voice low. His eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. "You." The words cracked something inside her. She wanted to argue, to push back, to remind him that she wasn't his to claim. But the memory of his body shielding hers, of him bleeding for her, silenced her protest. He handed her another folder. Inside were new documents, corporate dinners, charity galas, boardroom meetings. Her name was listed beside his, again and again. "You'll attend these," he said. "Publicly, it means you're under my protection. Privately, it means you're within reach." Tolani closed the folder slowly. Each page felt like another link in a chain. She told herself she'd sign for survival, for debts cleared. But as she looked at him, steady and relentless, she knew the truth. Her contract was no longer about numbers. It was about him. Tolani walked out of Jaemin's office with the folder pressed tight against her chest. The winter air outside bit at her cheeks, sharp and unforgiving, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the realization that her name had been written into his world, on guest lists, on schedules, in places she had never imagined standing. She told herself it was temporary, just a performance until her debt was cleared. Yet every step away from his office felt heavier, as though invisible strings tugged her back. At the cafe the next morning, she tried to slip into routine, polishing cups, serving regulars, but the routine no longer fit. She felt eyes on her. At first she thought it was paranoia, until she noticed them. Two men sitting by the window, always in different clothes, but with the same stillness, the same gaze fixed on her. When she left after her shift, a black car followed a block behind. It didn't try to hide. Her chest tightened. She spun around once, daring them to come closer. The car slowed but never stopped. By the time she reached her tiny apartment, her nerves buzzed like frayed wires. She locked the door, slid the bolt, then sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone he had given her. Finally, she typed, "Your men are following me." The reply came instantly, "They're protecting you. Don't be afraid." Her fingers trembled as she wrote back, "That wasn't part of our agreement. I said contract, not custody." 3 blinking dots appeared, then vanished. Seconds later, the screen lit up again. "Nothing is done. I don't let go of what's mine." Tolani threw the phone onto the waste bin as if it burned. Her breaths came fast, uneven. He hadn't touched her, hadn't raised his voice, but his presence was closing in, everywhere, constant, undeniable. That evening, as she locked up the cafe alone, the silence of the street pressed in. Her hand tightened around her bag strap when she felt it, someone behind her. She turned sharply, and there he was. Kong Jin leaned against a lamppost, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. The yellow glow of the streetlight cut shadows across his face, making him look both unreal and dangerous. "You work too much," he said casually, as though they had met by chance. Her heart slammed. "What are you doing here?" "I told you," he replied, stepping closer. "Nothing is done. That wasn't the deal. It was one night, one contract. That's all." He studied her, his gaze sharp enough to strip away her words. "One night was never enough. You intrigue me, Tolani. You don't bow. You don't beg. You fight. I like that." Her breath hitched. "I'm not yours," she whispered fiercely, though her voice betrayed the tremor of fear. For the first time, a faint, dangerous smile touched his lips. "We'll see." And then he disappeared into the shadows, leaving her standing in the empty street, heart pounding, the echo of his words binding her tighter than chains. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm. Tolani moved through her shifts at the cafe, delivered parcels in the afternoons, and returned to her small room at night. Yet the sense of being watched never faded. Sometimes it was a suited man on the corner, sometimes a sleek car parked too conveniently near. They never approached, but their presence spoke louder than words. "You are not alone." She tried to convince herself that this was safety. After all, the debt collectors had vanished. No more men lurking behind convenience stores, no more threats whispered in alleyways. Yet the relief felt like a lie, because what replaced the collectors was far more suffocating him. One evening, as she climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, she noticed a small package waiting at her door. No note, no return address. Her pulse quickened. She picked it up carefully, half expecting it to explode with consequences. Inside was a phone, sleek and new, gleaming beneath the dim stairwell light. When she pressed the screen, it lit up instantly with a single message. "Use this only with me, and make sure not to discard it, or I'll keep replacing it. KJM." Tolani froze, the weight of the device sinking into her palm. She wanted to fling it down the stairs, to smash it against the wall, to prove she wasn't as tightly wound in his web as he believed. Yet her fingers curled around it, refusing to let go. She told herself it was practicality. If she didn't answer him, he'd just appear again, uninvited, in the shadows of her life. Better to have the line of communication, better to know when he would strike. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the whole truth. Part of her wanted to see what he would say. That night, lying awake, the phone glowed beside her. Messages trickled in, not constant, but timed with unnerving precision. "Did you eat today? You walk home too late. The man outside the cafe who stared too long won't return." Each text tightened the invisible cage. It wasn't violence. It wasn't force. It was something quieter, heavier, possession disguised as care. The next day, she felt it again, how close his world pressed against hers. A customer at the cafe, drunk and sloppy, grabbed her wrist when she cleared his table. Tolani flinched, trying to pull free, but his grip tightened. Before she could speak, one of Jaemin's men appeared as if summoned. The man shoved the customer back, hard enough to send him stumbling into the wall. His voice was low but sharp. "The boss won't like anyone touching what's his." The words chilled her more than the incident itself. She stood frozen, wrist tingling, the customer slinking out muttering curses. The suited man gave her a curt nod and vanished just as quickly. Tolani's chest heaved. She hated it. Hated that part of her felt safer knowing Jaemin's shadow lingered over her. Safety at the cost of freedom. That night, another message lit the new phone. "You see now. With me, no one dares." She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. She wanted to scream, to fight, to run. But when her fingers finally moved, they typed 3 words she swore she'd never write. "I hate this." The reply came instantly. "You will learn. Hate is just the first stage." The rain fell hard against the glass of Tolani's small apartment window, drumming a rhythm that kept her awake. She curled on the edge of her bed, the glow of the new phone lighting her face. Dozens of unread messages from Jaemin filled the screen, short, precise, suffocating. She had stopped replying hours ago, hoping silence would create distance. But silence never stopped him. A knock rattled her door. She froze, heart thudding. It was nearly midnight. No one visited her at this hour. She rose slowly, each step heavy, and pressed her ear to the door. "Tolani!" came his voice, low, calm, terrifyingly certain. Her blood ran cold. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered through the wood. "I know," he replied softly. "I don't know how I got here either." The bolt scraped as if her body moved without permission. The door creaked open, and there he stood. Perfect suit, dark coat, rain glistening on his shoulders, eyes unreadable. He stepped inside without waiting for her consent, the air of her room shrinking under his presence. Tolani backed away, arms folded tight around herself. "You can't just walk into my life whenever you please." His gaze tracked her every movement, deliberate, unhurried. I already have. You're suffocating me, she shot back, her voice trembling but fierce. This isn't protection, it's a cage. He closed the space between them with measured steps, stopping just inches away. His voice dropped to a near whisper. You can fight me all you want, but you'll learn something, Tolani. The more you resist, the closer I am. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She hated him, hated the way his presence wrapped around her like smoke. Yet she couldn't deny the undercurrent of something else, something dangerous that stirred whenever his eyes caught hers. His hand lifted, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. No force, no violence, just an unyielding control that made her feel powerless all the same. You can scream, you can hate, but you'll still answer when I call, he murmured. Why me? She demanded, voice cracking. You could have anyone. Why chain me? For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, or maybe loneliness. Because you make me feel at ease, he said simply. Everyone else bows. Her throat tightened. She wanted to push him away, to reclaim the air in her room. But her body betrayed her, frozen under the gravity of his presence. Finally, he turned toward the door. I'll send someone for you tomorrow. Be ready. The door shut behind him, leaving silence heavier than the rain. Tolani collapsed onto her bed, burying her face in her hands. She thought she had escaped debt collectors, clawed her way out of danger. But the truth pressed harder now. She hadn't escaped at all. She had only traded one trap for another. And this trap had a name. Kong Jin. Tolani never imagined her life would twist this way. A month ago, she was juggling cafe shifts, late-night deliveries, and sleepless mornings, scraping coins to survive. Now, she stood in front of a full-length mirror inside a room she had no right to enter, staring at her reflection in a gown of deep crimson silk. The fabric clung and flowed like it belonged to someone else, someone born to walk into chandelier halls, not squeeze past subway doors. Her sleek bun, usually a mark of practicality, now gleamed with deliberate polish, framed by a pair of diamond studs she hadn't chosen. The gown, the jewelry, the makeup, none of it had been her idea. It had all been delivered earlier that evening with a note. Wear this. Tonight you're with me. KJM. She'd wanted to resist, to refuse. But she knew better. If she didn't appear, he would come for her himself, uninvited, like last night. Better to walk willingly than be dragged. The car that arrived was not the usual black sedan. This one was longer, sleeker, its tinted windows reflecting the city's neon. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Jamin waited for her, immaculate in a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. For a moment, silence. Then his eyes swept over her, deliberate and assessing. You wear power well, he said. I wear survival, she corrected sharply. His lips curved in the faintest trace of amusement. Survival and power are the same garment. You'll see. The club's private hall was nothing like the cafés or diners she knew. Gold-trimmed walls soared high, velvet curtains cascaded like waterfalls, and crystal chandeliers bathed the room in ruthless brilliance. Men in tailored suits whispered over glasses of aged whiskey. Women in gowns dripped with diamonds, their smiles sharp as blades. Tolani felt every stare, every calculation. She gripped her clutch, wishing she could shrink into the wall. Jamin didn't let her. His hand rested lightly at her back, guiding her through the room with calm certainty. The gesture wasn't forceful, but it was possessive, an unspoken message to everyone watching. She was his. Conversations hushed when he passed, then resumed in lower tones. His name carried weight. His presence shaped the atmosphere. And now, so did hers. From her corner seat, Tolani watched as he moved among allies and rivals alike. His words were measured, his expressions minimal, but his presence commanded. She noticed how men leaned in when he spoke, how women's laughter faltered under his gaze. He was both predator and monarch, and the room bent accordingly. Yet when his eyes found her across the room, something shifted. For the briefest moment, his expression softened, as though her presence had carved a quiet space in his ruthless world. She looked away quickly, unsettled by the flutter in her chest. This wasn't her world. It was his. And yet, whether she admitted it or not, she was already tangled in its silk and its chains. Thank you so much for staying with us, till this very point in the story. If you're enjoying it, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below by telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to hear the lessons you learned from this story and your thoughts on how we can keep improving to bring you the very best. The night in Cheongdam was still buzzing through Tolani's body hours later. The crimson silk clung to her memory like a second skin, the chandelier light burning in her eyes. She had stood beside Kong Jin as if she belonged in his world, but the truth gnawed at her she didn't. And yet, the world had noticed her. By the next morning, whispers had already spread. At the cafe, a regular customer lowered his voice to his companion while staring too long at Tolani. On the subway, two women in designer coats murmured in Korean, glancing at her reflection in the glass. Even her boss avoided her gaze, as though she carried a danger he didn't want to acknowledge. She hated it. She had wanted to disappear into Seoul's crowd, but Jaemin's shadow made her visible. That evening, a black car appeared outside her apartment again. This time, it wasn't one of Jaemin's drivers. The vehicle was different. Foreign plates, tinted windows, its hum louder, more aggressive. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar slicing across his cheek, the same man who had tried to lunge at her during the fight in the private club. Tolani froze, her grocery bag slipping slightly in her grip. "You shouldn't be walking alone," the man said in accented English, his voice rough. Her heart hammered. "What do you want?" He smirked, but his eyes were cold. "A warning. Kong Jin isn't your savior. He's your cage, and cages, no matter how gilded, always break." She tightened her jaw. "I don't need your warnings." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "He'll use you. And when his enemies realize you're more than decoration, you'll bleed for his pride." Tolani's breath quickened, but she refused to back away. "Then why tell me?" "Because," the man said with a crooked grin, "a cage is weakest when it doesn't know it's cracking. And you might be the crack." Before she could respond, another black sedan pulled up sharply at the curb. Jaemin's. His men spilled out, eyes sharp, hands near their jackets. The scarred man chuckled, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax. I only came to talk." Jaemin emerged last, his suit immaculate, his gaze like sharpened glass. "You've already said too much." The scarred man smirked again, retreating toward his car. "Be careful, Kong. Even chains snap if pulled too tight." With that, he slipped into the vehicle, which roared away into the night. Tolani exhaled shakily, clutching her bag to her chest. Jaemin's eyes snapped to her, unreadable. "Did he touch you?" "No," she whispered. His jaw clenched, fury simmering beneath his calm. He stepped closer, voice low. "Stay near me. Always. Do you understand?" Tolani's throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to scream, to remind him she wasn't his possession. But the memory of the scarred man's warning lingered, and fear silenced her. She only nodded. For the first time, she wondered if her survival now depended less on escaping Jaemin, and more on surviving the war that came with him. Seoul's skyline glittered like scattered jewels as the car sped toward Gangnam. Tolani sat rigid in the back seat, her grocery bag forgotten on the floor beside her. She could still hear the scarred man's voice, every word echoing like a bruise. A cage is weakest when it doesn't know it's cracking. Jaemin hadn't spoken since they left her street. His silence was heavy, sharper than anger. When the car finally stopped, it was in front of a glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. His penthouse! She hesitated, but his men were already holding the door open. There was no room for refusal. The elevator carried them upward in a smooth hum, her reflection flickering in the mirrored walls. She clutched her coat tighter, feeling exposed under his gaze. He hadn't looked away from her once. The door slid open to reveal a world that didn't belong to her. A living room the size of her entire apartment, marble floors gleaming under recessed lights, floor-to-ceiling windows unveiling Seoul's endless night. Everything smelled of cedar and smoke, deliberate, expensive. "Why am I here?" she demanded as soon as they entered. Jaemin removed his jacket, draping it neatly over the back of a chair. "Because your street is no longer safe. If they wanted to hurt you, they would have already tried. But he spoke to you. That makes you a target." She crossed her arms. "And what does that make me here? Another possession you keep locked in your tower?" His jaw tightened. He walked toward the windows, hands in his pockets, staring at the city below. You mistake protection for possession. I don't, she shot back. You control everything, where I go, who follows me, what I wear. That isn't safety, Jaemin. That's a leash. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers with unnerving calm. Then tell me, Tolani, why didn't you run when he approached you tonight? The question struck her silent. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had wanted to run, but she hadn't. Something had rooted her in place, something colder than fear, something she didn't want to name. He stepped closer, his voice quieter now. You didn't run because you already know. Without me, you're prey. With me, no one dares. She swallowed hard, forcing herself not to look away. Safety isn't freedom. His gaze softened, just slightly, a flicker of something human beneath the steel. Freedom is a luxury. Safety is survival. And survival, he said, reaching out to touch a strand of hair near her temple, is what I promised you. She flinched back, heart pounding. Don't twist this into kindness. You're not saving me, you're chaining me. He let his hand fall, but his expression didn't shift. Maybe, but chains are stronger than debt collectors, aren't they? The truth of it stung. Tolani turned toward the window, arms wrapped around herself. The city lights blurred against her vision, dazzling and suffocating all at once. For the first time, she realized something worse than being trapped in Jaemin's world. She was beginning to understand it. The days inside Jaemin's penthouse blurred together. Tolani had never lived among such quiet luxury. The refrigerator was always stocked, the curtains opened automatically with the morning sun, and security guards rotated outside her door as if she were royalty or a prisoner. She tried to convince herself it was temporary, that she would find a way to reclaim her independence. Yet every time she thought about leaving, the scarred man's warning returned, chilling her spine. Outside these glass walls, she wasn't just in debt anymore. She was bait in a war she didn't understand. One evening, she wandered into the study. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled not with novels but ledgers, reports, and legal volumes. Behind the wide desks sat Jaemin, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, head bent over documents. His concentration was absolute, pen moving with quiet precision. For a long moment, Tolani simply watched. He didn't notice her at first, and in that unguarded second, she saw something different. Not the ruthless power broker, not the man who bent rooms with silence, but someone tired. Someone carrying weight heavier than money. When he finally lifted his gaze, their eyes locked. He set the pen down carefully. You shouldn't be here. You invited me into your cage, she replied evenly. That means every corner is mine to walk. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, but his eyes were unreadable. You're bold. Or foolish, she said. Depends who's judging. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Most people avoid this room. They don't like to see the machinery behind the empire. It ruins the illusion. Maybe I prefer the truth. Something flickered in his expression, amusement, pain. He rose from the chair and walked to the cabinet. From it, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. He handed one to her. Tolani hesitated, then accepted. The glass was cool against her palm. You think I control everything, he said finally, his voice low. But you don't see the nights I can't sleep. The scars I carry for decisions others forced me to make. She sipped the whiskey, its burn sharp down her throat. Then why hide it? Why not show the world you're human? Because weakness, he said, stepping closer, is blood in the water. And in my world, blood draws sharks. Their eyes met again, the air charged. For the first time, his mask had slipped. Not entirely, but enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the armor. A man who was lonely, haunted, perhaps even desperate. Tolani's chest tightened with a dangerous mix of pity and fear. She couldn't afford to care for him. She knew that. But standing there, glass in hand, she realized she already did. More than she wanted to admit. Jaemin set his own glass down, his gaze never leaving hers. Don't mistake this for confession, Tolani. You're not here to heal me. Her voice was steady, though her heart wasn't. Maybe not. But you've already stopped being the monster I wanted to hate. And that terrified her most of all. The next few days brought a strange, fragile calm. Tolani slipped between her cafe shifts and Jaemin's world of marble floors and hushed deals. His men trailed her less obviously now, blending into the rhythm of the city. Still, she never forgot they were there. But calm in Jaemin's orbit never lasted. One cold evening, she left work later than usual, scarf wrapped tightly against the wind. The streets were quieter than normal, neon signs flickering over shuttered shops. She quickened her pace, bag pressed to her side. The silence wasn't ordinary, it was watching. The prickle at her neck came too late. A hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her into a narrow alley. She kicked, clawed, muffled screams tearing from her throat. "We told him he'd pay," a voice hissed in her ear. "Now he pays through you." Panic surged. There were 3 of them, maybe more. Rough hands pinned her arms, a knife pressed cold against her ribs. She fought anyway, teeth sinking into the hand that held her, boots slamming against shins. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd slip free. Headlights exploded into the alley. Tires screeched. A black car skidded to a stop, doors flung open. Jaemin's men poured out, guns drawn, voices sharp in Korean. The attackers scattered, but one held her tighter, blade digging into her side. "Back off, or she dies," he shouted. The world narrowed. The knife, her ragged breaths, the iron grip crushing her arms. And then Jaemin. He stepped from the car with terrifying calm, his suit immaculate even in chaos. His eyes locked on hers first, then on the man holding her. "Let her go," he said, voice low, steady. "Too steady." "Or what?" the attacker snarled, pressing the blade harder. Tolani gasped, her skin nicked, blood stinging. Her heart thundered. She wanted to scream for Jaemin to leave, to save himself. But he didn't move with fear. He moved like certainty. In a blur, faster than her eyes could follow, he raised his gun and fired. The shot cracked the night open. The knife clattered to the ground, and the man collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Tolani stumbled free, her body trembling uncontrollably. Before she could fall, Jaemin was there, catching her, pulling her tight against his chest. His hand pressed firmly against her back, anchoring her to him as if the world might tear her away. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair, his voice tight with fury and relief. "I won't let anyone touch you." Tears blurred her vision. Her body shook, but not only from fear. There was something else, something far more dangerous, rising in her chest. The realization that she wasn't just bound by his chains. She was falling for the man who terrified her. And when his arms tightened around her, Tolani knew the truth. Whether it was protection or possession, she no longer wanted to pull away. The sirens came late, long after the alley had emptied of attackers. Jaemin's men moved like shadows, cleaning the scene with ruthless efficiency, leaving no trace that could be traced back to him. Tolani sat in the back of the car, trembling, her hands smeared with the faint memory of blood that wasn't hers. Beside her, Jaemin pressed a cloth against his side. The knife hadn't touched her, but the fight had left him with a wound of his own. His white shirt was streaked crimson. "You're bleeding," she whispered, reaching for the cloth. His hand stopped hers firm. "It's nothing. Nothing." Her voice cracked. "You just—" she swallowed, unable to finish the sentence. "You just took a bullet for me. You just killed for me." He met her gaze, eyes steady, as if the blood meant less than the air between them. "I told you. No one touches you." The car pulled into the underground garage of his penthouse. His men tried to escort him upstairs, but he brushed them off with a glance. Instead, he let Tolani guide him, her hand hovering at his arm. It was the first time he allowed her to feel as though she was leading. Inside, the penthouse lights cast everything in sterile brilliance. She pressed him down onto the leather couch, heart hammering. "Stay still." He smirked faintly, despite the pain. "You give orders now." "Yes," she snapped, fumbling with the first aid kit one of his men had set on the table. "If you bleed out, I'll never forgive you." For a moment, something unguarded flickered across his face, something almost like warmth. He said nothing, just let her clean the wound, disinfecting and bandaging with hands that shook more from emotion than fear. When it was done, she sank onto the edge of the couch, exhausted. He studied her quietly. "You're still shaking." "Because I almost died," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Because you almost died. His eyes darkened, softer now. This is my world, Tolani. Violence doesn't wait for permission. And I don't belong in it, she whispered back. Silence stretched between them, heavy with truth neither could deny. Yet his hand lifted, brushing lightly against hers where it rested on the couch. Not forceful, not commanding, just present. You do now, he said. Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to remind him this wasn't what she signed up for. But the warmth of his hand, the memory of him stepping between her and death, silenced her protests. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his armor, the man who carried scars not just on his body but buried in his soul. And it terrified her, because caring for him meant binding herself deeper into a cage she wasn't sure she could ever escape. As the city lights flickered through the windows, Tolani realized something chilling. The chains no longer just belonged to him. She was holding some of them herself. The days after the ambush blurred into uneasy stillness. Tolani remained in Jaemin's penthouse, her small bag of belongings tucked into a guest room that felt more like a gilded cell. Security men rotated shifts at the door, their presence constant, invisible yet undeniable. She told herself she was safe, but every time she caught her reflection in the penthouse's polished glass, she wondered if safety had become another word for captivity. Jaemin, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing had happened. Meetings filled his schedule. His men came and went with hushed updates, and the scar on his side healed beneath crisp shirts and tailored suits. But Tolani noticed things. The way his jaw tightened when he thought no one was looking, the restless pacing in his study at night, the untouched glass of whiskey left sweating on his desk. On the third night, she found him there again, staring at the city lights like they might offer him an answer. Papers lay scattered across his desk, contracts, ledgers, photographs of men with hard eyes. She hovered at the doorway, torn between leaving and stepping closer. "You should sleep," he said without turning. "So should you," she replied softly. At that, he glanced over his shoulder. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "Sleep is a luxury. One I can't afford." Tolani walked inside, her arms folded. "You think you can carry all of this alone? Even steel bends when the weight is too much." A faint smirk curved his lips. "And yet you haven't left. If you truly hated this world, you'd be gone already." Her chest tightened. "You make it impossible to leave." He rose from the desk, crossing the room with slow, deliberate steps. When he stood before her, the space between them throbbed with unspoken tension. "And if I asked you not to leave? If I told you I need you here?" Tolani's breath caught. "Need me? Or want me?" His gaze bore into hers, sharp and unflinching. "Both." For a moment, the air seemed to collapse around them. His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. But he didn't touch her. He was waiting, something she had never expected from him. Tolani's pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed to step back, to remind him this was wrong, dangerous, inevitable ruin. But another part of her, raw and treacherous, longed to lean in, to see what it would mean to stop fighting. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. "If you want me here," she whispered, "then let it be my choice, not your command." Silence. Then, slowly, his hand lowered. "You draw lines," he said quietly. "I've never known anyone to draw them with me." Tolani opened her eyes, meeting his. "That's because no one else dares." For the first time, his smile wasn't sharp or dangerous. It was small, almost human, and that frightened her more than any threat ever could. The next morning, the penthouse buzzed with tension. Jaemin's men moved briskly through the halls, voices clipped, faces hard. Tolani caught fragments of their words: rivals, shipment, retaliation, but no one stopped to explain. She was both visible and invisible in this world, acknowledged but never fully included. At breakfast, she sat across from Jaemin at the long glass table. He scrolled through his phone, unreadable as ever. The silence pressed on her until she couldn't bear it. "Your enemies know my face now," she said. "I'm not just collateral anymore. I'm a target." His gaze lifted, sharp and direct. "That's why you're here. With me, you're untouchable." She set her fork down. "Do you even hear yourself? You call this protection, but all I see is a bigger bullseye painted on me." His jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. You'd rather I let you fend for yourself? Work double shifts at the cafe until they dragged you into an alley again. Her throat closed. She hated that he was right, hated that survival seemed to come only at the cost of his chains. You don't get to decide for me, she said quietly. His phone buzzed, interrupting. He glanced at the screen, then stood abruptly. Stay here. Don't leave the apartment. Tolani rose, frustration sparking. There it is again, commands, not choices. He paused at the door, his back to her. Tolani, this isn't a debate. It's war. And then he was gone, leaving her staring at the empty space he'd left behind. Hours passed, the penthouse unnervingly quiet. Tolani wandered restlessly, trying not to imagine gunfire or blood in the streets below. Eventually, she ended up in the study again. His desk bore more than ledgers this time. Folders were spread open, and inside them, photographs. Her chest tightened as she flipped through them. Men she didn't know, some circled in red. Locations scrawled in Korean. And then her own face. A candid shot outside the cafe, another at the subway entrance, another from the night she first entered his office. Her hands trembled. How long had he been watching her before she even knew his name? The front door clicked open. She shoved the photos back into place just as Jamin entered. He looked tired, his tie loosened, but his eyes went straight to her. You've been in my files, he said flatly. Tolani's throat went dry. You watched me, before I ever asked for your help. Why? He closed the distance between them slowly, deliberately. Because you were already in danger. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone cornered you. You don't get to play savior when you've been pulling strings all along, she snapped. His face remained calm, but his voice dropped lower, rougher. You think I watched because I want to control? No. I watched because, for reasons I can't explain, you mattered before you even knew my name. Tolani's chest tightened painfully. She wanted to scream, to demand answers. But what terrified her most wasn't his surveillance. It was the flicker of sincerity in his voice. And the part of her that believed him. The argument lingered like smoke in Tolani's chest. Even after Jamin disappeared into his study, she couldn't shake the image of her own face in those photographs, frozen and unaware. He had stripped her of privacy long before she ever agreed to his contract. And yet, instead of fury alone, something more dangerous stirred. Curiosity about why she mattered to him at all. The next evening, the storm finally broke. They were supposed to attend a dinner with business allies at a high-rise hotel in Gangnam. Tolani dressed in another gown delivered to her room, black silk this time, the neckline sharp as a blade. She told herself it was just another role she had to play. Nothing more. But the moment they entered the ballroom, she knew something was wrong. The air was too tense, laughter brittle, conversations clipped. Jamin felt it too. His hand brushed her back, steadying her as though anchoring them both. Dinner never truly began. Halfway through the first course, the double doors at the far end burst open. Men in dark jackets stormed in, weapons glinting beneath the chandeliers. Screams tore through the room as guests scrambled, chairs toppling. Jamin rose instantly, his men forming a shield around him. One attacker shouted in Korean, his voice slicing through the chaos. Your empire ends tonight. Tolani's heart hammered. She crouched low, pressing against the table, eyes wide as the room fractured into violence. Glass shattered, wine spilling like blood across white linen. Stay down! Jamin's voice cut through, commanding, certain. She obeyed instinctively, ducking as a spray of bullets cracked the windows. Through the blur, she saw him, Jamin moving with ruthless precision, directing his men, shielding her path as though nothing else mattered. He wasn't untouchable tonight. Blood smeared his cheek, his suit torn. Yet his eyes never left her, not once. One of the attackers spotted Tolani. Their gaze locked, and she knew instantly she was leverage. He lunged, grabbing her wrist. She screamed, struggling, the world spinning as he dragged her toward the broken glass of the window. Before panic swallowed her, Jamin was there. His arm hooked around the man's neck, wrenching him back with brutal force. The attacker fell hard, groaning, and Jamin shoved him aside, pulling Tolani against his chest. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, frantic in a way she had never heard. She shook her head, though her body trembled violently. For a brief moment, time slowed. The room still rang with chaos, but all she felt was his arms around her, his heartbeat pounding against her ear. Then, just as suddenly, it was over. The attackers fled under the weight of approaching sirens. Glass crunched underfoot as survivors staggered to their feet. Jaemin's men closed ranks, ushering them out. Yet Tolani knew something had shifted. Tonight, she hadn't just been a witness. She had been the weapon his enemies reached for, and he had nearly broken himself to keep her safe. As they left the wreckage behind, one truth burned in her chest. She wasn't free anymore. She was the fracture in his empire, and he would never let her go. The night after the ambush, Tolani sat curled on the leather sofa in Jaemin's penthouse, her knees drawn to her chest. The city glittered through the vast windows, cold and indifferent. But she couldn't stop hearing the echo of gunfire, couldn't forget the look in the attacker's eyes when he reached for her as if she were just another tool to break Jaemin. Her wrist still ached from his grip. Jaemin stood near the window, his shirt stained with blood at the cuff, speaking in low tones to his men. His posture was composed, but his shoulders carried a stiffness that betrayed the storm beneath. When his men finally left, silence filled the room, heavy as the smoke of a dying fire. "You should rest," he said without turning. Tolani let out a sharp laugh. "Rest? After what just happened?" He faced her then, eyes unreadable, but darker than she'd ever seen. "I told you before, you're a target now. Tonight proved it. They will use you to get to me." Her heart clenched. "And whose fault is that? You put me in the middle of this war." His jaw tightened. "I pulled you out of debt collectors' hands. Without me, you'd already be gone." "I traded one danger for another," she shot back. "At least the debt collectors wanted money. Your enemies want blood." He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. "And yet," he said softly, "I keep giving mine to protect you." Tolani froze. His words hit like a blade wrapped in silk, dangerous, intimate. She thought of the bullet he had taken for her, the blood soaking his suit, the way his body had shielded hers without hesitation. Her voice softened despite herself. "Why? Why risk everything for me?" For once, he didn't answer quickly. He lowered himself onto the sofa beside her, close enough that she could feel the quiet heat of his presence. His gaze rested on the floor before lifting to hers. "Because when they reach for you, something in me refuses to let go. You're not leverage. You're not decoration. You're the line I can't let them cross." Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to believe him, but the chains of his world wrapped too tightly around her. "Then stop treating me like I'm yours to keep," she whispered. "Protection doesn't mean control." His hand moved, brushing against hers, but he didn't take it. He let it rest there, an invitation instead of a command. "Then stay," he said quietly. "Stay because you choose to, not because I order it." Tolani stared at his hand, trembling. For the first time, he wasn't demanding, wasn't closing her in. He was leaving the decision with her. And that terrified her more than any of his orders ever had, because freedom was what she had wanted, and now she wasn't sure if she could take it. The following days unfolded in fragile silence. Jaemin's men tightened their patrols, and the penthouse became less a sanctuary and more a fortress. Tolani felt it with every step, the invisible eyes, the locked doors, the sense that her life no longer belonged to her. She tried to drown herself in small routines, brewing coffee in the mornings, reading whatever books she could find in his study, sketching notes on napkins about the life she wanted beyond all this. But even in those stolen moments, the cage pressed in. On the fourth night, she stood by the window overlooking the Han River, the city shimmering like broken stars. Her reflection stared back at her, tired eyes, sharp shoulders, a woman who looked nothing like the one who had arrived in Seoul full of fragile hope. Behind her, she felt him before she heard him. Jaemin's footsteps were always steady, deliberate. He came to stand beside her, his gaze on the water. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice quiet but edged. "I've been thinking," she replied. "About what?" "About whether this," she gestured around the penthouse at him, at herself, "is real. Or if I'm just another possession you've chained down." The words hung between them like smoke. Jaemin's jaw tightened, but his voice dropped lower, almost fragile. "You think I see you as a possession?" Tolani turned to face him, her eyes burning. "What else am I? You cancel my debts. You shadow my steps. You shield me from enemies I never asked for. But you never ask me what I want. You just decide for me. The silence cracked open with thunder from the city's distance. Jaemin's gaze softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again. You think I could let you walk away now? After everything? Her throat tightened. Yes. Because if you don't, this isn't love. It's a cage. For the first time, she saw him falter. His hand curled into a fist, then slowly released. He stepped closer until no air separated them, his voice raw. I could have any woman I want, Tolani. But I chose you. Do you know why? She shook her head, afraid of the answer. Because you give me reasons to want to protect you, he whispered. You make me feel alive in ways nothing else does. That's why I can't let you go. Her chest heaved, torn between fear and something else she refused to name. But then, as if summoned by fate, the penthouse door exploded inward. Splinters flew, men in masks storming through, weapons raised. Gunfire erupted. Jaemin grabbed Tolani, shoving her to the ground as bullets tore through glass and steel. His men fought back, shouts mixing with the acrid burn of smoke. Tolani crawled across the floor, heart pounding, until she saw it, Jaemin collapsing, blood blooming across his side where a bullet struck. No, she screamed, scrambling to his side as chaos roared around them. She pressed her hands to his wound, tears streaming. Stay with me. His grip found hers, weak but unyielding. His lips moved, voice strained. Now you see why I can't let you go. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet dread. Machines beeped steadily, a fragile rhythm that reminded Tolani with every note that Kong Jin was still alive. She sat at his bedside, her fingers laced with his, watching the paleness of his face against the white sheets. He looked different here. No immaculate suit, no commanding presence, just a man stripped of his armor, tethered to tubes and wires, vulnerable in a way she had never imagined possible. For hours, she didn't move. She replayed everything in her head. The shattered glass, the gunfire, the way he had thrown himself in front of her without hesitation. He had bled for her again. And with every drop, the line between captor and savior blurred until she could no longer tell which he was. When his eyes finally opened, weak but burning with the same intensity she knew too well, she leaned forward, her throat tightening. Are you leaving me? His voice was barely a whisper, rough from pain and exhaustion. Tolani swallowed hard. Her answer should have been simple. She should have said yes, should have chosen freedom the moment she had it in her grasp. But the words tangled in her chest. I don't know, she admitted, her voice breaking. But if I stay, it's because I choose to. Not because you chain me here. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Jaemin closed his eyes and nodded, as though finally understanding. Then stay by choice, he murmured. Hours later, Tolani stepped outside the hospital. The rain had cleared, leaving Seoul glistening, the streets reflecting the lights of a city that never slept. She drew her coat tighter, her breath clouding in the cold. She wasn't the same woman who had once run through these streets, drowning in debt and desperation. That girl had been scared, powerless, easy prey. Now, she carried scars, some visible, most not, but she was still standing. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of Jaemin's men. The rivals are regrouping. War isn't over. Tolani stared at the words, her heart pounding. She realized then that she was no longer an outsider. Whether she wanted it or not, she was part of this world now, a fracture in Jaemin's empire, and perhaps the only thing keeping him human. She walked toward the Han River, its waters reflecting broken stars across the surface. Footsteps approached behind her, steady and familiar. She didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. You're still thinking of running, Jaemin's voice said, softer than she had ever heard it. Maybe, she answered, her eyes on the water. Maybe not. He stepped beside her, his coat brushing hers. For once, there were no commands, no chains in his words. Only a plea. Don't disappear tonight. Tolani's hand hovered, then found his, their fingers brushing but not intertwining. Not surrender. Not escape. Just choice. The city moved on, alive and dangerous, but so was she. Her story wasn't over. It was only beginning. Thank you so much for staying with us till the very end of the story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear the lessons you learned and your thoughts on how we can continue improving to give you the very best. Here at Munlyt Stories, every tale is crafted with passion, care, and dedication. Our mission is simple: to entertain, inspire, and connect us all across cultures and hearts. So, keep the conversation alive in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Till next time, we are Munlyt Stories, bringing you amazing tales that touch hearts and spark imaginations.